Thank you. Maybelline, did you
So,
do your
yes.
opening? Okay.
I was just gonna say good morning. I'll pass it to you because I feel like everybody know you, Carissa, and just remarking all girls today talking about money, and we want to hear it from you, Carissa.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Maybelline. I really appreciate the opportunity. This is my third year, I think, now teaching this course with Food Access LA. And it's such an honor to be with all of you. I am inspired by everything that you all are doing. I love to be aligned with power women who are going after their dreams. And like I said, I'm inspired and motivated by you all just showing up and really getting after what you need to do to scale and grow your business. My name is Corissa Hernandez. I see a lot of familiar faces. I literally taught last week, so I know a lot of you are back here, so I won't talk too much about my background. But I will share in the context of investors and why I feel I can really confidently speak to this is that, I started my career as a school teacher and transitioned into the financial world. So 18 years ago, I started my first business, and that was a financial brokerage firm. And I think that the beauty in starting there is I learned how to talk money. I learned what investors are looking for. And yes, I was working with investors who are looking to invest, whether it was in the stock market, their retirement accounts, their college funds. But I knew what language investors look for and what numbers they look for and what types of presentations they need to see in order to feel confident to invest money. And so I was able to bring that with me into the business that we then 10 years ago launched, which was a craft beer bar. So my very first business in the food and beverage industry was actually a retail bottle shop, which was specialty craft beer and wine with a small bottle shop tasting room. And then from there, we scaled into 3 additional bars, which were beer and wine, and then cocktails. The last one had a restaurant element to it. So I kind of crash coursed that through the pandemic, which was chaotic, but nonetheless, we knew we had to do what we had to do in order to survive. And thank God we're on this side now, moving forward and being able to get back out here and help others learn from the very many mistakes, which were good and bad, but we want to make sure that you don't have to make those expensive mistakes and learn from us. Our very first bar, we self-funded. We did the biggest rookie mistake in the book and cashed out all our money, including selling our home so that we could self-finance and open our own bar. And I say that that's a rookie mistake because there's a lot of ways to access funding without having to put yourself at such high risk the way that we did. When we then moved on to our second bar, that's when we started accessing investors. And so a lot of those investors started coming from actual customers who were really aligned and excited about what we were doing with the first bar. And were always voicing to us, whenever you move on to your next project, I want to be a part of it. Whenever you move on to your next project, I want to be a part of it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how if you do have a loyal customer following that does voice to you that they want to be a part of something in the future, how you tap into that and make it part of your investor programming and getting yourself systematized. But we'll talk about the different types of investors that there are out there, pros and cons to each, and questions you should even ask yourself before getting into investors. I will say that after our first bar, all the 3 following were all investor funded. Like I said, there's pros and cons to that, but all 3 were opened with 0 of our money. Which was really nice, but in the end, you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to give up, and what are you willing to, allow investors to have a say in your business? And so we'll talk about how to structure that and how much you shouldn't give up so that you maintain full ownership and why. But with that, we're going to get started. I know we have an intimate group, so if you have a question, we do have the flexibility of you asking questions. Just raise your emoji. I think there's a little hand emoji that you can click on. If not, feel free to drop questions into the chat box and I'll check them at the very end. So without further ado, So when it comes to investments, it's really important to kind of demystify all the different terminology when it comes to getting investor money. Sometimes we hear about, oh, well, there's the Series A or the pre-seed, and then we're just like, what the heck is that? And so these are things I kind of learned as I trial and errored my way forward when it came to investors and the different types that there are out there. I will say that a lot of friends of mine who are product-based do go a little further than just friends and family. With the type of businesses that I'm structured with, I was able to get funded with just friends and family, but am very familiar with the other types of investments as well. So first and foremost is the pre-seed or angel and or friends and family type of investors. This is when you're raising money from friends and family, coworkers, people who believe in your vision. They're aligned with what you're doing. They think you have a fabulous product. They know that you're going to be successful and they want in. This is typically whenever you're raising anywhere from 50 to 500,000. This is the type of investment round that you're in. And this is ideal when you want to first validate your idea, typically pre-launch idea phase. This is where this type of investment comes in. So, if you're opening your brick and mortar, if you're launching your product and you need to get all the marketing and the bagging and the packaging in place, this is a good place to start. Now, the seed round is raising from angels and some institutional investors. So we haven't got into venture capitalists yet. That's the following round, but this is just right before you have to get to that point. You're typically raising anywhere from 500,000 to 2 million in the form of a convertible note or giving up equity of your business. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how much equity you should make sure you're maintaining in order to maintain ownership of your business and or your idea versus how much you are willing to sell off. And then you'll have to have proven traction. So you never want to jump to, hey, I need 2 million because I'm ready to put this into all the Whole Foods in the nation. Without showing a track record. Investors will say absolutely not. They want to know you have skin in the game and that you put the legwork into your brand before they're willing to put the big bucks behind you. So you have to have a track record and channels for scaling. They need to know that you've already done the work. And then Series A is raising from institutional, more often known as venture capitalist investors. Now, this part can get a little tricky. It could be very, very rewarding in the sense that if you're looking to scale some sort of product, this is definitely where you want to be, but you have to, by all means, have attorneys review anything that you are signing with the VC investor. I've heard horror stories. I've had friends myself who have lost their businesses to VC investors because they were too trusting and did not follow the legal format of having an attorney always review what you are signing. This is typically when raising 3 to 10 million in the form of equity. At this point, no one's going to say, oh yeah, I'll lend you 2 million or $3 million in return for a 5% interest. Absolutely not. They want part of your business. So you are going to be giving up equity at this round, and how much you're willing to give up in equity will be really important once you get to this point. And at this point, absolutely your traction matters. They're going to ask you for your books. They're going to ask you for your business plans, what your scalable plan is, and how you plan to utilize that money to then grow that brand. So this part, you're dealing with a lot of money, and there's going to be a lot of requests being asked of you. I think for the most part, this group here, based on the individuals that I've worked with closely, based on the information that Food Access LA has made accessible to me, we are all looking at pre-seed or angel, friends and family round. And so I'm going to focus a lot more there. That's not to say that I'm not going to touch on the other types of investments, but we will be going deeper into the pre-seed round because that's typically where I believe most of us getting our first, second, even third locations will be, or getting your brands into stores. All right, so I've broken down based on my experience talking to investors over the years, and I haven't shared exactly how much we've raised, but between my husband and I and over 4 different projects, we've successfully raised over $5 million in investor money. So we've had a lot of experience over the years, again, not just in my financial background, but specifically in growing my craft beer, craft cocktail business. So what I've learned are that there's 7 tips really that I think you would really benefit from in making sure you're making the right decision in deciding the type of investor you're looking for, how much, and what you should give in return for those funds. But I think it always starts with questions. These are serious questions you need to have with yourself, really reflect on them, because bringing in an investor is almost like a marriage. This is a relationship that involves money. And I will always say this, whether it's a financial workshop or a business workshop, when it comes to money, people get funny. So we want to make sure that we're willing to take on this relationship, not just for the money, but also with the individual. So there's very important questions to ask ourselves before proceeding with the investment or investor route, because there's different ways to fund your business, but this specifically is if you're looking for an investor to give you money. So first ask yourself, should I even raise money? Now, I think in the conversations that I've had with a lot of you one-on-one, most of us are in the phase where, yes, we need access to funding because we're ready to grow and scale our business. So for the most part, a lot of us are at the yes, I need to figure out how to fund my business. The second question is, can you fund your idea yourself? Now, in looking at what you are providing, whether it's a service or a product, is it something that you can access funding right now to fund it yourself and not have to deal with an investor? And if the question is yes, then I highly encourage you not to bring into an investor. There's a lot of things that happen when investors are in the picture. And the more you can maintain complete ownership of your business, the more freedom you have in your business. But that's not to say that investors are always bad. I think that there's really healthy relationships out there where investors are phenomenal. Yeah, they bring not just money, but talent to the table. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But if you can fund the idea yourself, then you don't need the investor. Are you just starting up? If you are just starting, it's going to be a little challenging to get an investor to put money behind your product or service. The reason why is because they haven't seen your track record yet. When it comes to investors, and again, whether it's the stock market or your business, an investor wants to see historical performance of how their money could potentially grow. Are they going to lose money by investing in you, or are they seeing a potential for return by investing in you? So if you're just starting up, chances are the investor may not be willing to take that risk. They haven't seen your work ethic. They haven't seen your branding. They haven't seen what customers are responding. So if you're just starting up, investors is probably not the opportunity for you right now, but it will be. And are you looking to scale? So this is those of you who already have had a few years under your belt. The demand is there. There's a lot of demand. People are loving you, but you can't keep up with product or service because you need more money. So if you're looking to scale and that's your track record, then absolutely it's time to start thinking about an investor as a funding option. So these are very important questions to ask yourself. This may sound like, well, Corissa, well, this is so elementary. Why would you say this? Trust me. I wish somebody had told me to ask myself these questions before I went into my second bar, because I probably could have funded myself. And I just kind of was like, well, if I don't have to put money in, I could bring in an investor, then I'm going to do that and give up 49% of my business in exchange for 0 of mine in. And we'll talk about what happened there. Number 2, last week we spent a lot of time when we were talking about grants, about the power of knowing how to master your story. Now, when I tell you master your story, I cannot stress enough how important this is. Your story, when it comes to investors, is everything. This is the one opportunity that a person who will give you funding actually cares about what your background is. You can walk into a bank and say, you know what, I need $100,000. And they're going to say, okay, show me your credit, show me your financials, black and white, black and white. They don't care that you're a risk taker. They don't care that you know how to overcome challenges. They don't care that you have the most amazing tasting desserts on the face of this planet. They just care if you have good credit and if you have something to collateral what you're asking for. The investor, on the other hand, cares to know about you, your background, and your ability to overcome challenges, how you came up with your concept, what you've been doing to grow your business. So knowing how to tell a compelling story is everything. And I've said this even in the grants workshop, because even there, the story matters, but even how you grow your brand. Right now, people, I feel like it's a beautiful time for small businesses to be able to tell their stories because our consumers are moved by who's behind the brand and what they stand for. It's probably one of the first times in history, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was just about who had the cooler commercials with, you know, these famous models drinking out of, you know, fancy Coke cans or whatever it was. Right now, it's like, no, I want to support my local community-based mom and pop business because they remind me of me. Because I heard their story and I'm really moved by what they're doing, you know. So know how to tell your story. And I think that Maybelline had mentioned last week that you guys had an entire course on how to tell your story. So I think that's amazing. If you missed that course, ask Maybelline for the recording, but really invest time into knowing how to tell that story. Most of our investors, we were blessed because most of our investors came from existing customers. They saw how much work we were willing to put. They saw our finished product. They saw what we were able to create, the teams we were able to manage, and how we were able to grow that first bar. So they didn't have to hear the story. They witnessed the story and they came to us and said, we want to give you money. We want in on your next business. And you know, a lot of us look at Instagram as like, oh, that's just extra work. I don't want to really do anything there. And I feel you because I'm a very busy entrepreneur myself, and Instagram just seems like such a headache. When I have free time, it's like, I just want to rest. I want to like decompress. But I make the time to invest into even my personal Instagram because I know that the spillover from my bars or my financial firm is going to come to my page to see, what is this girl about? And because people are able to hear my story and see what I stand for, literally this past weekend, this woman attended an event that I was promoting at my restaurant, and she told me, hey, I just inherited a lot of money. I wanna fund your next bar. And it's kind of one of those situations where like, excuse me, what? But these are things that end up happening because they see what you're able to tell, what you're able to stand for. And I know a lot of you personally, and when I tell you, you have a compelling story, if I could, I would put a lot of money behind you. So know how to tell that. It's very important when it comes to investment pitching. Have any of you watched Shark Tank by raise of hands? Shark Tank on TV? A lot of you have seen it. So the thing is, if you notice on Shark Tank, they'll come out and do the pitch on their business and then they'll do the whole thing. But then the very first question most of the time is, tell us about yourself. And then that's where the heartstrings start getting pulled. You know, I can recall the ones that made me cry. Just their story moved me that much, but that's how powerful that is, because that is something investors care about. Invest time in mastering your story. Give me 1 second. I need to plug in this charger. Give me 1 second. Maybelline, or not Maybelline, Mercedes, I see your hand up. I don't know if you're just responding to the Shark Tank or if you have a question.
No, I was responding to Shark Tank.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Mhm.
Sorry, my computer is also working overtime. All right. Number 3, be prepared to illustrate to investors your plan for the funds that you're requesting. Okay, so investors like to see game plans, and you need to understand your numbers. So for those of you that I'm blessed to work with one-on-one, this is something we talk about often, but understanding what it is your business needs right now. And so I know that we're all really good at being creative. That's what's led us into wanting to be entrepreneurs and creating the products and services that we've created. We're creative people and we thrive on that. So sometimes the logistical side of things are just kind of like, oh God. And then when it comes to numbers, it's just like, I really don't want to do that. But there's a statistic that's alarming when it comes to small businesses, and it's that the average small business will last only 5 years. And I believe strongly that that has nothing to do due to our work ethic. It has nothing to do with our product or service. It has a lot to do with not understanding the basics of budgeting or having access to funding or understanding when we need to scale and when we need to wait a little bit longer. So taking time to really dissect your numbers is very, very, very important and crucial when it comes to the growth of your business, and especially when you're looking for funding. We don't want to just throw out a number that says, oh, I think I need $25,000. I think that's how much I need. Because number one, we don't know that if that is too much that you're asking for, because you don't want to have too much extra money that you're going to owe interest on, or if it's too little, you want to just execute the first time when you get out there and pitch to your investors. So it's really important to have your database where you list all the things that you need in order to scale your business. If it's equipment, list that equipment. If it's marketing, what type of marketing are we looking for? Are we looking to hire someone, or we just want to pay for some ads? Do we want digital marketing? Do we want paper marketing? What is it? Is it product? Do we need to pay cost of labor so that we have the people power to create more of it? Whatever it is, create that database. And then also do the research. How much is allocated to each line item? So if it's equipment, let's just say it's a refrigerator you need because you have an overflow of inventory that you need to store either in that refrigerator or freezer. How much is that? And then each line item, put a number next to it, because that's going to tell us exactly what you need the fund for. And then also future projections. So based on like what you did this year, what you see yourself doing in 5 years and 10 years, those things are really important when it comes to investors. But I'm also going to show you exactly the type of projections they like to see. But number one is for you to be organized and understand what it is you need and how that money will be utilized. And you have to be able to explain this when you are asked by an investor, why do you need that much money? What are you going to do with it? And you better be ready to be able to execute that answer and be able to provide an illustration to them so that they can also see how that money is going to be used. Very important. Number 4, this I learned after my very first investor, and I cannot stress this enough. What does your ideal investor look like? And I'm not talking about physically what they look like. I'm talking about in your mind, when you bring an investor on board, what is it that they're bringing to the table? Because money, everybody can bring money. And if that's all they're bringing, then it's a disservice to you and your business. I always like to say that if I'm going to bring an investor on board, number one, they need to understand business. They need to understand business because these are people who every month or every quarter, depending on how you do your profit and loss statements, are going to have a lot of questions for you. You're dealing with their money. So if you did not have a profit that month or that quarter, they're going to have a lot of questions about why. And if they don't understand business, you're going to be wasting a lot of your time explaining how business works, right? Because we all know that business is cyclical, especially in food and beverage. We have our really good months, and then we have some, you know, a little bit slower months. And that all has to do with the consumer mind. January, people are, if you're not in the, you know, diet business, we're probably not going to see an uptick in business. Not for me, at least. People go into dry January and they detox and go to the gym. They're not hanging out at cocktail bars. So I understand that, and so do my investors. But if they didn't, then I have to explain a lot in January why there was no big profits. So understand what you need from the investor. Is it literally just funding? Do you not care about anything else? Also know that that comes with a price, right? Do you need advice? I love investors that have some sort of business experience. They ran their business, they're successful, they're retired, they just want to have their money grow, but they have all this experience. So not only am I getting funding, I'm also having access to someone that can provide advice when it comes to any particular part of my business. Is it a skill set? You know, one of my investors is a genius marketer. He knows how to create logos and websites and marketing game plans and all of that stuff. And so I thought, okay, cool. You can bring that and money in exchange for equity. And it's ultimately saving me from having the expense of having to pay someone to help me with the marketing, because the investor is self-motivated. He knows that if he brings that skill set to the table, then more than likely the business is going to create a profit. So what type of skill sets are you looking from your investors? If you, in a perfect world, could have both money and a skill set from that individual. And then also like the type of relationships. This is a marriage. This is somebody that is buying equity from your business. They're going to be involved at a whole deeper level than just kind of, oh, this tastes good. Good job. It's like, what are you doing here? Why didn't you try this? Have you tried that? Why don't we do this? You know, they're going to have some feedback for you, unless from the very get-go, you let them know that they are a silent investor. Now, once you have the type of investor that you're looking for, then you want to know if you're looking to keep control of your business and if you are willing to sell equity. Most investors are going to want equity from your business. Now, the magic number, as I'm sure you all know, for you to hold on to full control of your business is 51%. So you never want to sell more than 49% of your business if you're looking to keep full control of it. 51% makes you majority owner. You will have final say on everything. Now, the moment you become a 50-50 owner, you have say, but not 100, not the full control say. Now it's just kind of like bouncing off ideas until you guys come to an agreement. So make sure that if you're looking to maintain control of your business, you're not giving up your 51%. And then we'll talk about how you price out equity in a little bit. Are there any questions so far? We've gotten through half of the 7 tips for pitching, and we're going to get into spreadsheets in a little bit. So I want to make sure I'm stopping for questions and water.
Yes, Carissa. Mercedes does have a question. So with followers, what is the best way to ask them to join as a donor, as a seed donor or angel investor towards that location?
That's an excellent question. So if you have customers who right now come in and say, hey, I love your concept, I want to be part of it. If you ever open a second location or if you grow it in any capacity, What we started doing was just asking every one of these people for their email and phone number. So then we started collecting just names, numbers, and emails. So that when we did have the opportunity to do a presentation, because we actually did a live presentation. So we created, and I'm going to show you guys what it looks like in a little bit, our pitch deck. So then our pitch deck, what we did is we invited everyone who was interested in an investment opportunity to come out to one of our locations. Obviously, we had to set up to do a presentation. We provided coffee and sweetbread and had everyone sign the non-disclosure agreements. And so we did the presentation for them there. So everyone who showed up got the presentation of what we were planning to do, how we were pricing the equity purchases, and then allowed them to schedule a follow-up one-on-one. Because what we didn't want was everyone asking questions and bombarding everyone right there and then. So we just kind of passed out follow-up sheets so that they could schedule one-on-ones with us. And then that way we were able to get deeper into the details of it, and then allow us to kind of really filter through how much they were willing to invest, how much equity they were looking to purchase. And obviously we wanted to keep it to as little investors as possible. You never want more than, I would even, if in a perfect world, I would only want one investor. Yeah, I've had opportunities in the past where I've had 5 investors and 2 and then 1, and I'm happy at 1. So it's really those types of questions, but that's how you tap into followers or customers. You're going to want to collect their contact information and then invite them to when you're going to do a presentation. I always like it in person. I've been invited to presentations that are done on Zoom like this, and they kind of just do the presentation and then allow us to do follow-ups later. But I like it in person. It's a lot more effective for investors who are putting a lot of money in. Any other questions so far in that chat box?
Yes. So Lola is asking that she was suggested by a business coach to start a fund up with the promise of discount meals or free food for those who donate. Is that a good avenue, or this is something that will actually generate some investor money?
So just to clarify the question, the business coach recommended that they offer discounts and free food.
Discounted meals or free food for those who donate?
Oh, donate.
Mhm.
So I feel like if I'm understanding that question correctly, I did do a round of crowdfunding on my first bar, because I was trying to self-fund. So it wasn't your traditional investor, it was more people looking to make donations. And when I did the crowdfunding, I would offer some sort of incentive in return for their donation. And I made sure that the incentive was a fraction of the cost in comparison to the donation, so that obviously I was getting majority of what they were donating and giving back just very little. So for example, a sticker, I think at the time was costing me like 10 cents. So if they did $5 donations, they would get a sticker. And it was something that simple. Or even I think I might have done, because I remember one of my donations was you get a high five. I swear, I was like, you get a high five. And I think it was a $5, you get a high five, $10, you get a sticker. And then I had like t-shirts at one point. And then I think for the $1,000, you were getting invited to a VIP tasting event. So that I recommend when you're doing crowdfunding, but an investor, I don't think they're gonna care too much about getting any type of freebie. They want to see opportunity for their money to grow. They want to see interest. They want to see profit. So I would do that. Now, investor discounts we do have at our bar. So, if they come in for dinner or cocktails, they get a discount, and our staff knows to discount their tab. But that's more of like just because they're investors, the bar wouldn't exist, but not in return for their money. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, Lola said she got it. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions there?
Nothing on the chat on this.
Okay,
Anybody
moving
else have on the picture?
well, I'll move it right along, and then if you have questions, just raise your hand. Number 5, research or industry. So is there a need for what you are offering? Now, obviously, some of you will be to the point where you're not being able to keep up with demand. So you'll know right there that you're ready to scale. But if you are at a point where it's like, well, I have demand, but I don't know that it's sufficient to convince the investor that there's an opportunity for, financial profit, then you want to do a deeper dive into the industry and say, look, the industry is growing, and have research that backs that up. And you can do that through Google searches, just kind of like find some statistics that back up the rate of growth over, a historical period of time where you see a growing demand for what you're offering. And investors love to see that. When an investor invests in a stock, they do a lot of research around the company, what opportunities are out there. Is AI going to grow, or is it just kind of a trend that's going to fall off? So they want to see the same type of research around your industry. So if you are in the coffee industry, what makes you different in comparison to the rest of the industry that is setting you apart and is guaranteeing that there is growth, so that this investor can see the opportunity for growth, and it's not just another coffee roaster. If you're doing desserts, what is it that sets you apart, and what is the growth opportunity for that industry? If it already exists, which is fine, there's hundreds, if not thousands of bars throughout Los Angeles. What makes mine different? Why would they want to invest with me? And why would I be able to tell them there's profit in this if there's already thousands of competitors out there? I have to be ready to explain that and provide them a visual that gets them to see the picture of why it makes sense, where I plan to put it, what my target audience looks like, and what my product is going to offer it for it to stand out amongst the rest, right? So it's really that value proposition, that competitive edge. You really have to lean in on that, because the investor wants to make sure that there's not someone out there already that's going to knock you out of the water and they lost their money because they decided to invest in you. And even the fact that you are involved in your business, that alone can make it different. Like maybe you have a special ingredient or a special recipe that you're bringing to the table, and that makes you different. The industry is typically, white male dominated, but you're a female woman of color coming into this industry, and you're going to really lean on that story. That makes you different. So there's a lot that you can present to the investor that will really help them understand why putting their money behind you makes sense. But you need to have these statistics ready to share with the investors so they see that their money has the opportunity to grow. Okay, so yes, you're going to move them and compel them emotionally on your story, but this is the point where they're really caring about, well, what are you going to do with my money? Think about it. If you gave someone $25,000 of your money, what would you want to see in return? In terms of, can you trust them to grow that money? And I'll show you what this looks like in a second. And then number 6, know your numbers. When I say know your numbers, again, going back to that database, why you need that money, how much you need, and why you need it. And I don't say this just because of the investors. I say it for your own sake too, because the worst thing is that you don't ask for enough, and then you find yourself in a position where you didn't have enough to scale that business. You didn't have enough to package those goods. And now you have to go ask for more money. So now you've created a loss, because now you're going out to ask for more debt. You created a loss. So ask for sufficient amount so that you're ready to go out the gates. It's just forward movement from there. So if you ask for too little, we're going to take a few steps back, and that is not a good look up front for your investors. So know your numbers. If you're saying I need 500,000, understand that you really did need those 500,000 based on all the things you said you needed, and cushion it a little bit. Make sure you give yourself a little bit of cushion, because things don't always pan out the way they're supposed to. When I first opened my first bar, I thought I had it all together. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so we negotiated our lease. We had cashed out our savings. We sold our home. Our bank account looked good. We thought we were in great standing. And then what I didn't know was how long licensing and permitting takes in the city of Los Angeles, and especially when it comes to a bar. I didn't know how ABC would take. I didn't know how zoning would take. I negotiated 5 months of free lease, so I thought I was in good standing. It took 16 months, 11 months of paying rent, of which was not allocated or cushioned on my numbers, which is why I had to end up crowdfunding, because I almost ran out of money before I opened my doors. So I cannot stress enough how much you need to understand your numbers and plan for worst case scenario to give yourself that cushion so that you're able to work through capital in order to get you where you need to be. Now, I know that's hard because you can't predict the future, but it's always good to just know your number and then say, okay, an extra 20,000, I think that this will be okay. Now it gets tricky because you got to factor in equity. You're going to have to price out your equity. And if you're having to raise a little extra because you want a cushion, but then you have to justify why your equity costs so much, you might want to self-finance the cushion. So again, that's why it's important to understand your numbers. I know this part is tricky. I'm going to have some illustrations I'm going to show you as soon as the presentation is wrapped up on the 7th, so that you can see visually what I'm talking about and answer some potential questions that might come up from here. And then number 7, your exit strategy. Every investor wants to see an exit strategy. This is worst case scenario. Now, some of you are looking to grow the brand to sell it, which is an excellent idea. Some of you are looking at it as, like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I don't plan to ever sell it. This is what I want to retire from. Whatever the case is, you're going to exit at some point. So what is the exit strategy? And having a proper exit strategy to present is very important, because what the investor doesn't want to see is the business just shut down. It just shut down. That means they lost their money. So if your exit strategy is, okay, well, if I build the brand and I sell it to a larger brand, then chances are they'll probably buy it for this XYZ amount of money. Then you're going to present that as the exit strategy. The goal for my brand is to sell it to XYZ larger brand. For someone like me, I would probably just sell the business when I'm ready to call it quits. And then I can evaluate how much it would be, and then say, okay, when I'm ready to sell the business, because of the location, because of the brand, because of the customer base, because of my sales, because of the licensing, I could sell it for $500,000. That means you would get this much money for your equity. So that's the way I would present that exit strategy. I'm going to show you the visual just here shortly. Always present the exit strategy. It is very important to an investor to be able to see that you have that also game plan, because now they're seeing, okay, I like this person, they're a hard worker. I like this person, they've built this brand. This is the projections they have. They've shown me the numbers. They know what they're going to do with my money. There's obviously demand for it. I can see exactly where they're going to put the money and why that helps scale the business. And they also have a way for me to gain back my money and more. Cool. This looks like someone who knows what they're doing. This is how you pitch to an investor. They want to see everything that we've gone through. And so at this point, I'm going to switch to a different presentation so that you guys could see visually what I've done here. So this is a pitch deck. This is an example pitch deck for you guys to see what I've presented personally to investors. So when I invite my investors to one of my locations to do the presentation, obviously I always want them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You don't want someone running off with any sensitive information and then just kind of beating you to the punch. So I always recommend having a non-disclosure agreement when you do present to an investor. And then I use Canva or PowerPoint, whatever the case is, to create the pitch deck. And your pitch deck is what you're going to use to present to your audience. I usually aim to have, and everyone's going to be different, right? If you don't want to host something so formal, you can ask friends and family to tune into a Zoom, or you could do one-on-ones. Whatever the case is, it's really up to you how you do it. I'm just going to share from personal experience what's been very successful for me. So when they come in, they'll see the name of the project that we're working on, and then the potential location. In my case, they're brick and mortars. In your case, they could be a brick and mortar, or it could be a product that you're offering. And so again, we start with our story. I think that for me, it's really important for them, if they don't know who we are already, that they understand what we bring to the table. Again, mastering your story, knowing how to tell it. This is not a time to be shy. You have to show confidence. The most confident person in the room wins. The mentor told me that, and I've stuck to it, and it has always been beneficial for me. So always be extremely confident in what you're talking about. You're bringing the goods. I know you need funding, but at the end, remember, you are bringing the goods. They would not have shown up if they didn't know that. So when you're up there presenting to your audience, understand that and tell your story. It's also important to incorporate in the story your background and experience in the industry. So if you have leadership abilities, how long you've been in the industry, why you understand it as well as you do, victories you've had, success stories that you have, incorporate that. Any type of recognitions that you've earned, incorporate that. And then management and leadership experience with teams. Now, some of you are going to say, well, I don't have a team right now, but you're not asking for money because you plan to be a one-person show forever. And if you did have a team, your investor wants to know that you know what to do with that team, right? And you could say, well, it's a product. I'm just going to, source everything out. Well, that's not exciting for the investor. They want to know that if you did bring on a team because you have to scale the business, you know how to manage and lead the team, because in the end, that team is going to help you grow that business, scale that product, whatever the case is. These are important elements to incorporate when you are talking to an investor. The space or the product, because again, we have brick and mortars and we have products. So what makes your space or your product unique? You need to be able to talk about it. This is where you sell it. How did you come up with the concept? How was it born? What does it look like now? Why is it different from what's already existing out there? Talk about that. This is where you sell the dream. Talk about it. What makes you different and why is it different? Now, the example for me, the project's going to be called XXX. The space is this big, right? So I'm aware, I'm already showing them like, this is what the space is going to consist of. What makes me different is in this area, I will be one of the few, if not the only full liquor license, which gives me that huge competitive advantage. I'm across the street from the Gold Line. Why is that important? Well, because in the city of LA, for those of you who live here, parking is a nightmare. And if my customers can't park, then there is no business. But I have a location that is right in front of the Gold Line. That right there already gave me a competitive edge compared to a lot of other places. I have a fully operational kitchen. We'll have a small menu to complement, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just talking about that. And another real big advantage that I'm going to have in my location is below market rent. That is outstanding and phenomenal and unheard of in the city of Los Angeles. So these things pique my interest, pique my investors' interest. So think about the things that for you, your investor is going to say, okay, I see it. I understand why that's a competitive advantage. And for those of you that I work individually with, we can get deeper into what that is. But for those of you I don't have the opportunity to work with individually, I'm happy to look at, what your competitive advantage is and fine tune it if you're ready to present it to an investor. Again, this is where you're going to go deeper into your product or your location. Continue to expand on what makes the opportunity unique. Continue to expand on it. This is the meat and potatoes of your presentation. If your investor likes your product, they see it, they can taste it. Literally, you want to have samples if that's what you're doing. But you sell them on the supply and demand. They are going to want in. Okay, we're not at the numbers yet, but we will be. But this is where you start kind of getting their palates ready for what you're going to feed them. Now, for me, it's all about location, location, location. I am a brick and mortar business, so location is really important for my investors. Why? The bars that I've opened have always been intentional, always. Like, I know that I could go to the West Side, pay an arm and a leg, but I'll have folks who have discretionary income to come out and spend. So most folks will say that I take a big risk when I choose the locations that I do, but because I have deep roots in those locations, and I understand that if I bring the audience what they're looking for, they will show up. I'm one of those, if you build it, they will come. And I stand by it, and I've had a lot of success with that. So I'm able to explain why I chose that location, in your case, why that product, who your target audience is, why what you're providing is going to draw them in, and why that product stands out against others. If you're a location going to build, so who is in that community? What does the discretionary income look like? If that's not in your favor, is the community, one of those where people come to a destination location? Can you build a regular base and all of that stuff? So these are topics that you want to include in your presentation. Now, the visuals are so important. So important. Your investor needs to be able to see examples. So if you're a location, what is your decor and ambiance going to look like? If you're a product, what is the final product going to look like? And I know a lot of you have done photography already through Food Access LA. This is an amazing opportunity to put those photos to work if you're ready to pitch to an investor. You want to put there so that your investors seeing, okay, oh, this is exciting. I feel it. This is something I personally like. I wanted to be part of this. And I'll tell you one thing, that investors who put money into food and beverage opportunities, more likely than not, they're people who've always had an interest in wanting to own something in the food and beverage industry themselves. They just don't want to put their time and energy in it. So if you're aligning with things that they're like, oh, I would have wanted this, they're more than likely going to put their money behind you so that you could do it for them. Now, here's where I tell you, you need to know your numbers, okay? In my particular project, I knew that I was going to need minimum $440,000 to make my dream a reality. So in this case, I knew that, number one, the location was requiring me to buy the business. Now, there's a lot to think about when you're looking for an investor and you're buying a location. And I'm sorry if this doesn't apply for some of my product-based people, but I know some of you are brick and mortar. When you are being asked to purchase the business, you have to ask yourself and the person selling the business a couple questions. When you purchase that business, do you get that liquor license transferred to your name? That is very important, because if they are not including that in the sale of the business, you do not want to buy that business unless you're really looking to buy their recipes and their marketing and their building and their Yelp and all that stuff. I was not looking to buy anyone's business. I was very much interested in the liquor license that was being provided, and that $200,000 was in alignment with about what that would all cost. So I was okay with that. So 200,000 was being allocated strictly to purchase the liquor license, which was disguised as purchasing the business. Now, 240,000 was for the following. Now, this is in my particular case, and I use it as an example so that you are aware of how you will list the items. Now, you don't have to put dollar per dollar on the list, but just know that your investor wants to get a basic idea of why you're asking for that much money, and it's not going to go into your personal savings account so you could take an extravagant, vacation. They want to know that that money is already allocated to a lot of very necessary business expenses. Jody, I see your hand up.
If you want to wait till you're done talking about this, because this has no bearings, well, it's investment bearings, but I'm not talking about brick and mortar bearings. So do you want me to jump in or?
No, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So my question is just on investments in general. The daunting place that I sit in is like how to come up with this thought process and what to, I'm not necessarily looking for investment, but it's understanding how to create that forward momentum and forward movement. I need this, I need this, I need that. And, I've worked, I've done other kind of cohorts like this that were supposed to help me create a business plan. And it never came to fruition, because of all the elements. But I guess my question is like, how do you start to figure out make these lists to make it all kind of come together? Because I think that I stop myself before I even start myself. Does that make sense?
100% makes sense, because I was also like you, where it's like, where do I even start? Right. And so I think that that's a common denominator when it comes to a lot of us who are just starting out our businesses and being intimidated by taking on so much debt. It's scary. I get it. I've been there. I would say that there's a couple things, right? It's getting really clear on the vision of your brand, right? So I know earlier we were just kind of having fun with vision boards and all that stuff, but it's okay to start there with your business. And I think you said that's what you do already. So that's great. You've already started that momentum. If that's what you're doing, you're already kind of getting a vision of like, I can see this brand getting here. So once you're clear on that vision, it's about backwards planning, right? Let's take it backwards. So what do I need right now to get me to the next step, right? So if it's product, is that product, you're right now already at the farmers markets selling it?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm direct to consumer.
Okay.
My product is not farmer's market really.
Okay, so then you're direct to consumer. So you want to
And then also like I'm trying to grow event spaces and like corporate things. Like I think that's my biggest struggle also, is I do something that's is a little different than everyone else. Like it's pieces of everyone else, but then also encompassed into something totally different.
and that's okay. And that's your unique offering, right? So I think that makes it very attractive to an investor, because maybe it's something that hasn't been seen before and you already come in with a competitive edge. So get really clear on that, like what makes it different and how you can describe that to an investor, because they're going to want to hear you tell them exactly, this is what I do, X, Y, Z. And then what you want to understand is, how do you scale that? How do you scale that? So if you're saying, okay, well, I want to grow event spaces, and forgive me if I'm going somewhere else with it, but let's just say that event space is a venue. Start looking at your ideal neighborhoods or communities that you're like, this is where I would want to have an event space, because it has the demographic, it has the greenery, whatever it is, right? So, and I say this in general for everyone, because the thought process starts like this. You want to already start envisioning as if it were happening right now, and then get an idea for what that costs. What is the cost of acquiring something like that? And then you can get really clear on like, okay, well, if I want that type of venue and I'm hoping to own it, then I'm going to need, $300,000 for a down payment. and I might need to finance the rest, whatever the case is, right? So, thinking about that. And for those of you who have product, maybe you need additional equipment. Maybe you need a more permanent kitchen. So you need to start thinking about, okay, what are the costs associated to get my business just to the next step so that I can start producing more to get out to the consumer. Those are the beginning steps. That's where I would say start, just kind of visualizing what the end goal looks like, work it backwards and how you get to the next levels. Now, you never want to go, oh, well, I need, this much product because my vision board shows I'm going to be in Sprouts all over the United States. Don't ask for that much money. You're going to put yourself in a lot of serious debt too early on when you're just in the beginning phases. And an investor won't take you serious. They need to see a track record. So what helps you establish that track record where you can continue asking for funding? Most of my friends who have packaged goods, I think they spent a good chunk of time just constantly asking for funding because they're scaling, constantly scaling. So what gets you to the next level? Once you're there, how do you scale to the next level and retain equity along the way?
I guess my question obviously is like long-term investment for the reach to get the bigger investment, but it's more like understanding, which you definitely like covered here, is more of not necessarily like personal investment, like getting the mindset, getting the game plan, getting it in writing. That is the daunting part. Like what I know, what I see, what I vision, but what it looks like to me to get it, the wheels moving.
Right. And I do agree that a business plan is definitely a starting point. All of this pitch deck came from a business plan. So really just kind of creating that summary, an executive summary, and that's just kind of putting in words your ultimate vision of your product, of your business, of your restaurant, of your bar, whatever it is. And incorporating in that executive summary your competitive edge. That's everything. People aren't going to want to invest with you unless they can see what makes you different. And I say that a lot, like I teach a young entrepreneurs course, which is young kids who are, trying to discover different opportunities. So it's not your traditional career path. And so we use taco shops as an example, right? In LA, it's a dime a dozen. You're going to find taco shops everywhere. So if I'm going to go to someone and ask for money, what makes my taco shop different? And I think that there's this young woman in Boyle Heights who does it really well. And her competitive advantage, as odd as it sounds, is she offers a pink taco and her whole brand is around pink and bougie, right? And so her whole concept is she uses very natural ingredients to create a pink masa. And she's built a very prominent brand just by doing that. She leaned in hard on that. And so people are really excited about the growth of her business and what products can even come out of that. So the competitive edge is everything when you're talking to an investor. So really think about what that is. Again, I think you have it. I think a lot of you already have that in your favor because I do work with a lot of you closely. And then the numbers is just how you scale. What are you looking for so that you know what to ask for? In the beginning, you want to self-fund. You want to self-fund as much as possible so you can create a track record. There's no track record, there's no investor. They need to see historical performance. They need to see at least a couple profit and loss statements to see what your growth has been year over year.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, P&L, I talk about this so very often. I know it's a lot of work. In the beginning, I try to do it myself because I couldn't afford somebody to pay on a monthly retainer. But the moment I could, it was a worthy investment because it was going to protect my financials. It was going to protect my business, and it was going to ensure the growth and scaling of my business. So the moment that you can invest in someone to support you with profit and loss statements, I can't encourage it enough. So profit and loss statements is absolutely something that is very, very, very attractive to an investor Now, when we're talking to investors, you have to think that their world consists of prospectuses. So what is a prospectus? A prospectus in the world of financial services and stock markets is just telling you how that stock performs, right? So that's what they're used to looking at when they're saying, here, take my hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you cannot provide something for them to compare, okay, what are the growth opportunities of me putting my money with you? Then you're missing a very, very lucrative opportunity to attract an investor to give you those hundreds of thousands that you're looking for. So the P&L statement, what you're trying to do here is just kind of show them how much money came in and how much went out. And at the end of that, are you creating a deficit or a surplus? If you have a surplus, trust me, investors will be fighting to write that check for you. Now, we have to be realistic. In the food and beverage industry, in the first couple years in the city of LA, that could be very, very challenging to be like, hey, I got tens of thousands of surplus dollars at the end of the month. So it's really important in the beginning, and I know it's a lot, and I can't stress the importance of like really taking care of your mental health care and making time for yourself, but you will need to invest a lot of you in the beginning in your business. It does require that because you are trying to show that you know how to keep the expenses low for your business so that you can generate some sort of return for your investor. It does require a lot of you in the beginning, and that's just the reality of it. And again, I can't stress just making sure you're taking time for your mental health care because I've been there. Now, again, the profit and loss statement is just kind of where the money is coming in. So here we see, okay, you know, there was money that came in here. So up here is where my sales, and these are projected sales. I want them to see worst case scenario, best case scenario, right? So, and that's how illustrations are done in the financial world. You want to show them like, okay, this I know for a fact I can hit. This is worst case scenario. On a very, very good month and with a lot of like marketing money, I can maybe hit these numbers, and that's what a great month will look like. So here they're able to compare, okay, well, I get an idea of what the business needs to do on a monthly basis. Now down here is where that money is being broken down to. So, you know, taxes, my cost of goods, expenses, oops. And then at the end of the month, are you able to see the bottom where it says, are you seeing my menu bar too? Down here where it says net ordinary income, these are the profits, right? This is the profits that I'm able to share. So here I'm showing my investor, okay, well, if you bought 10%, you're going to get 10% of that on a monthly basis. I'm going to just cut you a check, you're going to get it. And so they'll see, okay, well, I want you to hit the 80,000, obviously on a monthly basis. So I have to be very careful that what I'm showing them isn't just pumped up numbers. These are numbers that I'm willing to work my butt off to make sure I'm hitting, right? So that I'm not being very unrealistic with them. So if I hit this and you have 10%, I'm going to write you 10% of that. So go based off your numbers. They don't need to be this inflated, you know, they go off your realistic numbers. And that's going to come from your P&L examples. Now, here's why I break it down. Now the math here, a little tricky, so you have to follow along a little bit. So I already showed you all how much I determined I need for this particular business, right? 200,000 was to purchase the business, and 240,000 was for the build out, licenses, permits, all of that stuff. So in this case, I'm selling 50%. Now remember, I would never recommend that much. This is just an example for number's sake. So I've determined I'm willing to sell 50% of my business. And so I've broken it down to, okay, 1% of this 50% is going to be 8,800. Now, why is it this and not more? Well, I'm doing the math based on 50%, not the 100%. So only 50% of my business is where this math is coming from. Now, from experience, please write this down, tattoo it. I can't express how important it is. Never sell 1%. You're gonna end up with a ton of 1%ers answering to a ton of them, and then you're gonna drive yourself crazy. I never let anybody buy less than 5% at a time. And at this point in the game, I don't let people buy less than 25%. I want people who are serious, and I don't want to be answering to a ton of people. So there's been folks who are like, oh, what if like 3 of my friends get together and we'll buy the 25%? Absolutely not. No, I want to talk to one person only. So make sure you're not taking on too many investors. I did work with someone, I was doing business mentoring. I don't know why they hired me if they were doing what they wanted to on their own anyway. They ended up with 25 investors. Drove themselves absolutely crazy. So don't do that to yourself. Make sure that you're taking on as little investors as possible and trying to get the most from those individuals. So here, again, I'm showing just the breakdown. Now I'm just kind of breaking down based on their percentages. Okay, I showed you worst case scenario. If I hit this in sales, you would get, if you're a 5% owner, this much. And this is how many months it would take for you to regain your initial investment. They love that because they're like, oh, well, I'm guaranteed to get back my 44,000 and continue to make some because I'm making interest. You want to let them know and remind them that these numbers are not guaranteed. Get that in writing, have an attorney draft that up. These numbers are not guaranteed because the worst thing you want is an investor coming back. And I had a friend that this happened to, where your investor is suing you because you showed the wrong number. So make sure you're letting them know that these numbers are not guaranteed. They are strictly for illustration purposes, but also be sure that you're being very realistic with your numbers based on your own profit and loss statements. Okay, so this is just where I show them a little bit more about what they can expect on a monthly if I hit these numbers, and then how long it'll take for them to regain their initial investment. That makes it a little more attractive to them. They can put the numbers together. I did the legwork for them, so it's a little more, a little less threatening when it comes to how much I'm asking for. And then last but not least, I've talked about exit strategies. So in this case, I'm illustrating to my investor that I 100% have an exit strategy for the business. My exit strategy is to sell the business. So I'm going to wait till I'm ready to call it quits, or as together, based on the equity that we all shared, make that decision together that it's time to sell. And then based on how much we sell it and how much ownership they have and based in equity, what they're expected to get at the exit point once we sell the business. So obviously they're going to want a lot more. I've yet to see a bar, unless it's like some huge nightclub in Miami, sell for $1 million. But yeah, I just like to show them realistic to, wow, we're killing it type of numbers. But again, I let them know none of this is guaranteed. There's a lot of risk associated with bars or food and beverage industry. That is where I'm going to pause. I know that this is a lot of information when it comes to pitching to investors. This is a lot of the information I wish I knew early on. So I'm really excited to be able to have this opportunity to share with all of you. I know some of us aren't ready for an investor yet, but at least you get the idea of what you would need in the event that you're ready to pursue an investor. And again, I work with a lot of you on a one-on-one basis. So if there's questions that come up and you want to follow up with me, or you want to put your pitch deck together for investors, I'm happy to, work together on a session to make that happen. At this point, I'm going to take questions. I do see like the chat box is a little busy.
We have gone through almost all of the questions, except for the last one that Jody put on the chat that says, what are your thoughts on advisory board rather than investors?
I feel like advisory boards are good. I don't know how you would get the funding other than donations, right? If you structured yourself as an organization that required board members, and you have them have to come up with an amount to sit on the board. in those cases, and I've only seen this with a personal friend or personal friends who have nonprofits really, you're really their employee based on how you structure that board. So the board makes the decisions and you have to abide by that, and they have the power to replace you. So, you know, you don't give up equity, but you do put yourself in a position where you will be dismissed from your own business. I don't know that that's worth it. In my personal situation, if you're not wanting to take on investors because you just don't want to have to deal with answering to the questions of how money was utilized and why they're not making profits. I was talking to Maybelline earlier. It's not as common as it used to be in the past, but crowdfunding is an available option. I have gone that route before and I successfully raised, I want to say it was so long ago. I want to say it was like 25,000, maybe $30,000 that I was able to successfully raise. It was very stressful. But based on what I learned, I can give a lot of feedback on that. And how to prepare and what you need to do to have a successful campaign with less pressure on you.
I think also the question about the advisory board or just in general, it's like also how do you find people to invest other than, you know, friends and family and all these things. I spoke to another person in the food space, dessert space, consumer packaged brand, and as she was building her business, she found like a mentor who ended up being a financial investor well, he came in as a mentor and then he loved her product and he said, I want to buy into the business. And so that helped her scale and drive. She went from like making something at home just because she needed it to all of a sudden filling, you know, Whole Foods. And now she's all across the United States because of this gentleman. I want to say, and I don't know if he was a family friend, an older family friend who, like you, spoke towards, he worked in the business, not in food, but understood the world of business.
Mhm.
So what happens when, you know, like you're regular Joe like me and don't have people necessarily surrounding you like that?
That's a great question, Jody, and I'm really glad you asked. I think we're in a really cool time in society where there's organizations that kind of like have been founded that are out there dedicated just to bring together investors. And they are like kind of like the headhunter of like, oh, let me look out for cool women-owned brands that I can bring back to the investors and present and say, hey, this person is looking for funding. What do y'all think? And then they put the money into it. So there's those types of organizations, and there are a lot of community-based ones that are very specific. Some look for female-owned, some are BIPOC-owned, some are very even more specific or Latina-owned brands. So there's organizations like that that you can just kind of like spend some time Googling about, like community-based investment groups. And then I feel like we're in a time too where people are really intrigued by investing, and there's people out there with money who are really drawn to what we all do, but they're just not interested in investing their time into it, but are willing to put money behind it. So the more conversations you have about what you're doing and what you're looking for, somebody's going to know somebody, right? And even in my financial business, all I do is talk to people about like, oh yeah, you know, I do financial coaching, I do this and that. I help people put money to work, and then they'll immediately be like, oh, I know 3 people who need help with the whatever, right? Or even when I talk to people about bars, you know, I own a bar, it's in Highland Park, we do cocktails, da 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 da. I'm thinking about opening another one. They'll immediately be like, oh, I've always wanted to own a bar. If you ever need someone to invest in it, please let me know. That doesn't guarantee they're going to invest in me, but I know I can take their information and invite them to a presentation. So it's like just networking, constant conversations. And I think these community organizations make it a little easier because they're already kind of structured for these opportunities to invest in you.
I think my fear, and I'll share this openly, is vetting people. you know, trusting people, vetting people, knowing that they're in the same space you are, because, you know, I've been doing this for 6 years and I've seen a lot of different shades, right? So it's
Mhm.
like, I guess, knowing that these community groups are in the up and up, like, meaning the one cohort I did was supposed to be awesome, and I was set up to work with for the business plan, to create a business plan with a major university. And it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever experienced. I invested a couple months of a lot of hard work and a lot of stuff to basically not even have a returned email
Mhm.
after,
Yeah.
you know, like, they gave me some computer program to plug in my information, and then they were gone.
Yeah, and you bring up very valid points because it is scary, you know, like putting yourself out there and making sure is this a legitimate organization that is going to make the investment. I have always stressed the importance of asking if there's someone who they've invested in that you can speak with. And if it's legitimate and they're good people, then they will have no problem allowing you access to speak with folks who've worked with them. And then that'll help with the vetting process. And it's also an interview. It's not, I mean, we're all vulnerable because we need access to funding. That puts us in a very vulnerable space, but that does not mean that we're not in a position where we're not the ones bringing the goods. We are the ones bringing the goods. So we have every right to interview them as well. Like, what are you going to bring to the table? And I think that's an important conversation to have with anyone who's going to invest in our babies, because our businesses are like our babies. We've created them, we've nurtured them, we've grown them. And we want to make sure that whoever we're allowing in has the same interest and level of care and passion as we do for our businesses. So it's a two-way communication. You can ask for referrals and have an interview conversation with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we're down to just a couple minutes. Enough time for another question. I know it's a lot of information, but we can always take time to like chew it down, digest it, and get out there and make our dreams come true, whether it's investors, grants, personal funding, crowdfunding. I think next week you guys have loans too, right?
Yes, that's the upcoming webinar. Alternative, not from big institutions, but community-based loans.
Yeah, that's such a big deal. You know, I started learning more about that through the pandemic, the community-based banks, and they are phenomenal. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities that community-based banks provide. And that was something that was birthed through the pandemic too, which is really cool. But I've been there, I've done it. Every type of funding you can think of, I've done it. So I'm happy to answer questions at any point when it comes to my experience with different types of funding.
Any final questions for Corissa?
Well, I do have final thoughts. I do want to commend all of you for taking time out of your business just to show up and invest in your business. It says a lot about you and your character. They say that 80% of winning is just showing up, and that's what you all did. So feel really good about that.
So true. Well, thank you again, Corissa, for sharing all this valuable information. I do hope that once it's dig into it, to every one of you, like you find it useful. And if there are no more questions for Corissa, I'm just gonna let her go. Thank you, Corissa.
So good to see all of you. I'll see some of you this week.
Thank you.
Have a great day, Corissa.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.